Kia ora, and welcome to Constellations and All That. I'm your host, Tracy Cartwright, and together we will be exploring the world of family constellations with facilitators and clients from around the world, looking at different perspectives and experiences in the work, having a cup of tea and just chatting with some friends around their experiences in constellations. We'd love for you to join us. I hope that you enjoy this series as much as I have loved making it. Kia ora everyone, welcome to Constellations and All That. Today I have the pleasure of talking to Kathy Tracey. It's been a while since we've had a catch up, but I'm going to invite Kathy to share a little bit about herself before we get into some juicy conversation. Welcome, Kathy.
Thanks, Tracy. It's great to be here. So introduce myself. Well, so I have been kind of in amongst the constellations world, I guess, for 15-ish years. I'm a systemic coach. I mainly work with leaders, so I'm sort of a leadership coach. And I run quite a lot of leadership, workshops and training outside of pure constellations, but always taking a systemic approach. I was born in Aotearoa, but I spent 30 years over in the UK, and 25 of those in a little tiny island called Guernsey. Ran my own business there, and I don't know, what else do you want to know?
Oh, well, we'll see what else pops up. But you just said Guernsey, so my DNA profile has just been updated because they do this, they'll update their programs, and it said Guernsey.
Wow.
But it was saying Breton, Breton. Breton. Is that what they call themselves there, is it?
So Breton comes from Brittany in France, which is the closest part of France to Guernsey. And close enough to row to, if you happen to be a rower, which I was when I was there. Yeah, Brittany in France, the people there called themselves Bretons.
Well, there you go.
A lot of Guernsey French comes from that part of the world. And because Guernsey has a patois language, which is I suppose you'd call it Guernsey French, but it is different from French. So it is a patois that's derived from that link.
Okay, so you were working in your constellation field in Guernsey?
Yes. Yeah, that's when I first came across it. I was working in Guernsey, and I was presenting actually at a conference in Greece. That's a weird non-link, on team coaching. And when I was there, John Whittington was also there doing some constellations kind of taster sessions. And myself and a couple of colleagues said, "What's that? Sounds interesting. Should we go and have a look?" And we went and had a look, and I ended up being a representative, and I was blown away and intrigued and curious, and that started my journey.
Fantastic. John Whittington. I enjoy his work. Oh, it's brilliant. Okay. I didn't realize that about you. I know a few things about you. I know that you've done some amazing, like you shared earlier about rowing, and you've had some amazing events there. Would you like to share a little bit about that? And then we'll talk about the signs in the background.
So I love an adventure. That's kind of part of my DNA somewhere. And I'm keen on sport. And growing up, I was kind of in that era of, we didn't really have any female sports role models. And I often think my life might have been a bit different if we did. So I felt like I was often kind of beating a path that really probably didn't need quite as much energy as I had to put to it. So I started in kayak, and I represented New Zealand in flatwater kayaking. And then when I moved to Guernsey, I started rowing. Somebody rang me up and said, "Oh, we hear you're a rower." So I said, "No, I've never rowed. I've rowed a surf boat, but no, I can kayak." And they were like, "Oh, that'll do. It's all the same." It clearly isn't. Anyway, I joined the rowing club. I had a lovely, lovely group of friends there. It was super good fun. And we eventually, our big adventure was rowing across the Atlantic with 3 other women. And we became the first women's fours to row an ocean. So we got a world record. And
Yeah.
yeah, so, and what's great is it's a bit of a have, but I'll always hold that world record because we were the first. So it doesn't matter, everybody does it faster these days and better and all that. Yeah, we get to hold the I don't know the joy of being first. So that was
Absolutely. But yeah, I remember you sharing that with me when I met you. It was like, what?
yeah, it was,
Wow. I can't even imagine what it takes to do something that like that.
I think a decent level of ignorance is what's about to turn up.
Yeah. I do quite a bit of other things with a decent level of ignorance too. So I guess I do know a little bit about
There you
that.
go.
I love it. We were talking about earlier. I love your sign in the background. So you've just completed another amazing event. And for those who aren't viewing this, it says, Kathy, remember pain is only the French word for bread. Ooh la la. And then just 7.2 kilometers to Champagne. Mm, nice. So can you share with the listeners, what was that from?
Yeah, so just this weekend, just gone, I made an attempt on a 102-kilometre trail race in Tarawera in Rotorua, New Zealand. And I honestly didn't know whether I was going to make it. I'm 62 years old now, and it seems like a ridiculous thing to do. But I decided that even if I got to the start line without being injured and got all the training done, that would be a huge goal and, a fantastic effort. Yeah, so I went for it and actually did really well. I had a fantastic preparation. I had fantastic support.
Mm,
I'm much better these days at asking for help, something I was not so good at when I was younger. And yeah, I got some great nutritional advice. I had a running coach. And I have to tell you, like 18 months ago, I was like, I feeling like I was too embarrassed to go out running because I was old and fat and wobbly and people would laugh and I could only like shuffle and you know, blah, blah, all that stuff. And I just had a good talk to myself about my internal voice and how it wasn't serving me. And I should just tell it to say, thank you very much. It's very nice
mm,
of you to look after me. However, I choose a different path. And so I feel super proud of myself that I've actually taken this journey because it feels like I'm coming back to myself. This is, sport, activity,
mm.
adventure has always been a big part of me, and I kind of let it slip for a while, and it wasn't doing me any favors. And I now
Yeah.
feel energized. I feel like I've got my joie de vivre back.
Fantastic. So many women that I'm talking about too at the moment, and particularly women. The conversation hasn't really come up with men, but with women, and they're saying it's about they're finding themselves again, and they're they're taking deeper care of themselves. There's so much more awareness around self.
That's super good.
Mm,
I'm really pleased to hear that. Super good.
yeah. So, systemic constellations, and you work mostly organizational coaching in that field. Want to share a little bit about that for
Yeah,
those? Because sometimes people don't realize that constellations isn't just a family system.
yeah. Yeah, so I could probably almost say never, but I never say never. But I very, very rarely do any family constellation work, certainly not set up as family work. So
Mm,
we're all part of families, obviously, regardless of whether we're at work and we're in an organization, you know. So there are, of course, always traces of that flows through organizational constellations, but we don't really open with the mandate of uh, a question about family with, of course, the major caveat of when you work with a family business, because it's usually the questions often come back to a family dynamic or a family pattern or a loyalty or disloyalty or hidden loyalty that is showing up in the business. So I guess the main difference with organizational constellations is that the kind of issues that you tend to be exploring are slightly different in the sense that you're often looking at the health of the organizational system rather than the family dynamic. So, what's turning up, what is, the same as in a family, the principles are the same. Mm-hmm. So you're setting up a physical manifestation, if you like, or a representation of a dynamic in a business. And then, much like with a family constellation, you're looking at where are the energies, what's being attracted, what's being rejected, what's not being talked about, what secrets are, drawing energy from the system, all that stuff.
Yeah. I remember Jan Jacob Stam talking about how he'd worked with a business. This is just one of the examples that he gave. And he was saying that, there was a new CEO had come in and the business was, even though it was still producing, it was going downhill quite rapidly. And this person had lots of great credentials and everything, and on paperwork, it should have been going well. However, when Jan Jacob had worked with him with the whole company, it showed up that the tea lady had been there since the day the company began. So even though she was the person who delivered the cups of tea around the space, she had a higher position in the hierarchy, and the energy wasn't being, or the respect wasn't being given there as well. So they did some work around that, giving her the place, like she came first, blah, blah, blah. And how things shifted really quickly for that.
Yeah, it's super interesting that. So the longevity in an organization is a really interesting one because it often is, and exactly in your example, it's often different to the hierarchy, right? So more senior people can be newer, but in a systemic sense, those who have been there longer have priority.
Yes. Yes, longevity, but yeah, that's a better word.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a bit like, respecting your elders and some of the stuff you do with ancestral in a kind of a tiny way. But it's still that same principle of those who come first have priority in terms of their contribution to the system. And when leaders, and we see this a lot in teams, when leaders come in and I often get this as a presenting issue. I've come in as a new leader and this old guy or woman or whatever just doesn't respect me. And it's really hard to deal with them because they're older than me. They think they know more. And it's really, asking people to think about, what if that's true? What if it's true that they do know more than you? And it's not the question they want to really consider. They really would much prefer me to say, oh, here's some techniques for you to put them in their place.
Yeah, I'll fix that for you. You'll be right.
But it's interesting how quickly it moves if you can get a leader to sit with a person and ask them about their history in the organization and to really genuinely, with openness, listen to what it was like for them over the last 35 years that they've been there. And they learn a whole lot, show respect, and then suddenly it settles. The person is acknowledged. And once they're acknowledged, properly acknowledged, then they don't have to resist.
Yeah, because the system's built on, like you say, those who come first, what was put into it, the energy that's been there, all of that's been held in the space. Do you just mainly work with private or like individual companies, or are you working or have worked with government or schools, or how do you?
A bit of a mix. It's a bit of a mix. And where I'm often using this with individuals in coaching. So, I'll be coaching an individual, and then we'll come to a place in that coaching where they'll say, "Would it be possible for you to come and work with the team?" And that's often then when I can get in and kind of do a little bit more with the group, which is better,
Yeah.
a little more impact. But I also work with groups like, so I work at Outward Bound.
Yes.
And I do a women in leadership course down there, and we quite often end up in a constellation. It's not particularly part of the course, but quite often we end up doing sometimes a structured constellation, so something about transition. So we get people to move from where they are now to a transition space, just to experience what's happening for them in that transition, and then what's going to, how do they want to move forward as they leave the course, because those outward bound courses can be pretty life changing for people. They get a huge.
Absolutely. And what do you do with that, right? When you've had that amazing experience and things have shifted and you're going back into the world a different being.
Your system hasn't changed, but so you're going back into the old system as a kind of with a new, fresh, whatever it is that you're taking. And of course, it's very easy then just to get sucked back into how I was in the system before I left, because the systemic dynamics are so strong. So getting people to recognize that, and also not to fight there'll be people that they go back to who don't want the new version. Quite happy with the old version, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Particularly with the women's course, where sometimes we're dealing with people who say, I do everything for the family. And when you dig around into it, they're literally taking responsibility for everything in the family rather than having some balance about that. And so that rebalancing can be pretty painful for others.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're sharing that, I'm thinking about, it's like people who've gone in for help for addiction, things like that, and they're coming home to a system or back to friends and community where nobody else has done the work or shifted, and you're coming back into it, right? Into that space of being in a different energy, a different level. Yeah. And I sometimes notice that myself, like in this work, when we go to intensives or we've done a lot of training and stuff like that, and that you've peeled back the layers, and I come home and I'm like, who am I with my husband? Who am I in this house with my son? Having those steps, the resources to take it forward.
And to
Beautiful.
just acknowledge that, we are parts of so many different systems, and how we navigate those more consciously.
Yeah.
It's actually super helpful, because although once you notice, you can't stop noticing, which is, unfortunate sometimes when you think, oh, okay, I need to wind my neck in here and actually recognize that somebody else needs to have a turn, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think that just that freedom to not know, and to, just go, oh, the system is different. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's going to be, rather than, here's my plan.
Yeah. I'm coming back and I'm going to change everything. Everything's going to be different. Yeah. Have you got any examples of anything that you feel like that you can share with complete, confidence that there's not going to breach confidentiality, or that you're comfortable in sharing? So people can.
You mean as in terms of like changes with a client, that sort of thing?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, something like that.
In terms of team, like working with teams, I'm just thinking of probably kind of touched on the example really, but a team where a new younger manager had gone in and had been really struggling with people who'd been there for a long time. We pulled together a team day, and we did a constellation around belonging. Really was kind of the sense. And the question was around how do we have a team where we all feel we belong. So there'd been quite a bit of churn. So this new manager had come in, and staff had started to leave, and the manager's senior was the one who called me and said, can you come and just see what's going on here? And when we did the constellation, there was a sense from a couple of the people who had remained in the team that there was how do they describe it? I think they described it as a sense of disassociation. I can't remember the words they used, but to me, it came across like they all felt scattered. Scattered was the word.
Yeah.
They all felt scattered. And the manager's approach to that had been, let's get the task. She was very task orientated. Let's get the task right, because if we've all got one goal that we're all working towards, we'll draw together as we move towards that goal. And often that would work, right? That, in a business sense, that kind of makes, it's logical, right? And often that will work if a team can come together around a goal and can work together, it's all fine. But there was something else going on that wasn't allowing that to happen. And what we discovered through the constellation was that there had actually been a manager in this team who had been, the story was that they'd been made redundant. But the truth of it was, what unfolded was that they had actually been, there was a fraud involved. So they'd actually been caught.
Yeah.
But that was a secret and nobody was supposed to know about that. And that had made this, people wanted to belong but didn't want to belong because they somehow knew there was something wrong with the team and wrong with the manager, and the new manager had somehow, was representing almost this ex-manager's energy. So it was super interesting. And once that secret came out, we got it verified actually, because there were a few people who were kind of shaking their heads and going, but I wasn't even here then, so I don't even know about it. So how could it be affecting me? And I explained to them how these, things kind of linger in systems. And it was super interesting because the team had 2 empty spaces. They employed 2 new people with this new bit of knowledge and no more secrets. And the team remained stable for at least 3 years after that.
Wow.
It's super interesting.
Yeah. All those things. And when you think about all the businesses, organizations, and that have been built on secrets and deceit, fraud, I want to say murder, like there's all sorts of things that happen over history, if you're going back in time. And I could think of some of those bigger companies. Interesting, eh? How
I wished I'd had the opportunity to go in and work in this organisation, but I ended up coaching somebody who came out of an organisation where the head of the organisation, the CEO, had committed suicide. And the organisation was in all sorts of trouble, no surprise. And what they'd done is they'd got in a new CEO and they'd moved on. And that all of their messaging was about, we're moving on from this. It's very sad, but we're moving on. Nobody got the chance to grieve properly, only individually, And I just thought that was a definite kind of place where this sort of systemic understanding would have helped that organisation. The organisation actually closed down, and it was big. It was a big, yeah. So you see it, where people don't, that basic premise of systemic work, acknowledge what is, allow what is to be. Just the acknowledgement, we have had a CEO who has, and that has a huge impact on all of the people around them.
Absolutely. So what are you doing now in the way of, because you had a business partner for a while, and then I think COVID changed things there, if that's right. Just a little bit, right, for everybody.
Well, it wasn't, for us actually, it wasn't so much that. It was, so my business partner moved to Spain, and it was one of those gorgeous little partnerships that we had going, and I just said, honestly, my heart's not in it. We were doing it together. When we weren't doing it together, it didn't feel the same, so I just pulled the plug on it. and I'm very lucky that, I can do that. So yeah, now I'm working mainly with a few organisations. So as I get to my senior years, I'm working less often, and I'm really working with people who I feel or who express, the desire to change things. So I cherry pick a little bit, is the honest truth.
Yep.
I've got a few clients who, larger organisations. I work with them pretty regularly, and that's everything from coaching to running leadership training and outward bound courses, that kind of stuff. So just a real mix, which keeps me well occupied in between mad training for whatever's coming next in my mad adventures.
I love that that you're doing the outward bound though, because that is so empowering.
I love it.
Yeah, and adding the systemic side to it as well.
Yeah, it's super good.
Yes.
Being out in nature, there was a little bit of a, I don't know, time when running a women's only course was sort of going a little bit out of style. So people were saying, well, do you really need to run just women only courses? And I've always been quite staunch about they get something different. And yes, it would be lovely if it was the same, would it? I don't know. But what I know is that when women come together to do something that they find challenging, the way that they support each other is different. The bond has been incredible. And I work with mixed groups, and they have a good bond as well. But there's something different. There's something just in the energy, and I love it. It just gives me a huge buzz. And we're putting people in these challenging situations physically that really stretch them out into what's possible. But the confidence levels and the self-esteem that comes from them, super good, super good.
Fantastic. Need more of that in the world, hey? More of it.
Sometimes I shouldn't say this out loud, but sometimes I have to pinch myself that I'm being paid for it. It's like, this is amazing.
Yeah. I just had someone, because I have a side business that I make cacao. And I just had someone come and we were just chatting about what I'm up to this year. And she's like, oh, look, she says, I just love watching you doing what you love. And she said, does it feel like work? And I said, not really, because it's my passion. I'm loving it, and I can mix both my worlds, my cacao and constellations, and then I get to travel and explore and live my dream, really.
Yeah. It takes us time to get there, eh?
Yeah. 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 It didn't happen overnight, for sure.
It doesn't, but it's a journey worth having.
Yeah. I know that you're working, obviously, organizational, structural, that way, systemic. In your family life, like, do you transfer that into?
I think inevitably I have a systemic view. So I don't think I turn that off at any point.
Can you explain systemic view for those who are new to this?
Yes, it's a very good question. For me, it's always being aware that there are forces around us that we're not aware of, and because we're part of systems that interlock with each other. I heard a really nice explanation of it. I was on a course in London recently, a family dynamics course on siblings, which was super interesting. And the woman who was running the workshop said, imagine a child's mobile, and all the little part, when the wind blows and one part blows, everything starts moving and changing. And even if you try to move one little piece, everything else will be affected. I thought that was a really nice way of explaining it to people who, weren't so familiar. So I guess I'm aware of that. So I know that if I'm, like I did this amazing run at the weekend, and I was really conscious of the other people around me and the impact that everybody was having on this event. So all volunteers, all the little stories that were coming about why people were doing this. You know, there was people who were running for, they'd lost somebody and they were doing it in their memory, or, you know, which always brings a tear to my eye. Or, you know, I was walking alongside a guy at one point who just, he had this cool nickname, and I was saying to him, like, what's the name about? And he was chatting to me, and it's just like this little world opened up for me that I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
And it's just that being curious enough to see what other things are out there, and suddenly you're connected to these things. And so in family life, you know, you think about, if I take an action, what's going to be the other reaction that happens to it? You know, if I move my piece of the mobile, what else happens? So if I'm taking on, you know, a big event, what's the effect on others, and how do I make that okay, or how do I make it a positive experience for everybody? So yeah, so it's just kind of being aware of the kind of the shifting parts. What was super cool was at the end of the run, my niece appeared. She drove for 5 hours to see me come across the finish line.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
And it was something that I hadn't thought about, and now she's signing up to a run with me. So these little bits of, you know, inspiring others just by our actions. And trust me, seeing me come across the finish line after 102 kilometres wasn't that inspiring. It was not pretty. But it's, you know,
I bet it was inspiring, no. Whether it was pretty or not, I bet it was inspiring.
Oh, thank you. But it's like that, you know, it's just being aware of those things about how your energy can influence others. And, you know, I've had some really lovely messages from people saying, oh, you know, you really got me through that section, or thanks for slowing down in the bush because I think I would have got lost. Or I think that's it. It's an awareness of the fact you're not by yourself, and your actions are not just independent, and how your actions both interact with others and how others interact with you.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people think systems, because systems can, like, they morph right into other things, but people think it as it's a structure and there's a wall, and you're either in the system or you're not. But there's so much more to it, like that blends.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, because we're, you know, and we have our internal systems as well, right? So I had a lot, you know, nice example. So I'd helped somebody on the run for quite a few hours, and then when I got to another part, that same person was having problems. And I had a little internal battle with myself because my blisters had just exploded and I was in a bit of pain. And I could have stopped to walk with her. And I talked to another guy she was with and said, she's in trouble. And he said, I'll go back. So I carried on. Now, my internal voices were going, is that the right thing to do? Shouldn't you stop? Shouldn't you also go back with her? And then the other voice was kind of going, you've already spent quite a few hours with her. Your blisters have just exploded. If you slow down, you might not make the end. And, you know, when I think about where these voices come from, and I can acknowledge that they're both true and just both a part of me, then I can be settled with it. But if I try to, like, if I let them fight it out almost, so that can become a problematic system for me. So,
and it takes a lot of energy to fight that out, right?
Absolutely, which you don't have, I can tell you, after 96 kilometres. So but it's super interesting just how, you know, I think it's really interesting because if I think about that, I think about it as my mum's energy is surely you should stop and be nice to her and like carry her over the finish line. And my dad's energy, which is a bit more competitive, which I do lean towards, which is, you know, you are here on a race and you do want to finish and you've set yourself a goal and you're doing well, and, you know, and you've checked up on it, so that's okay. And, you know, if I acknowledge that, you know, it's a simple example, but it's kind of, I acknowledge that there's, you know, this is some of my ancestry coming out. It just helps me to go, oh yeah, well, I've got both those things. That's okay. I use one bit at one part of the race and one bit at another.
Yeah, it's a brilliant example, and it's amazing how I think we are doing so much of this, tapping into this bit and tipping into this bit without even being aware of it, right? We're not aware of how that happens. And once we become aware, it's like, okay. Yeah, and you can pull a little bit more from one and a bit more from the other. And at the same time, some people are not even tapping into any of it.
And I think we can do ourselves a real disservice if we're fighting it. It's back to that acknowledgement bit, right? So I quite often tell this story now. When I was a kayaker, I was training for Olympics, so it was quite a high level. At the national champs, where I was either going to qualify for the Olympic training team or not, my mum drove me up to the lake, and when I got in my boat for my race, she came to the side of the jetty and she said to me, "Just do your best, dear." I nearly lost it because it was like, of course, it was my world at that point. I'm 1 year old or whatever I am. And, like my whole life has been kayak. I've been getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I've been, like training 4 hours a day and blah, blah, blah. And she goes, "Just do your best." I honestly felt like punching her. It's terrible. But that's my mother's energy, right? That's like, I've got, and what a beautiful thing to say. But at the time, not it was so not where I was. And I think about it now and I think about how, it was like the perfect mothering instinct kind of thing to say. What she was saying to me was, "I love you no matter whether you fall out of your boat or you do well or you don't do well. It's all okay with me." What a lovely message. I couldn't hear it at the time.
Yeah. Is mum still around?
Sadly not. We lost her just 2 years ago now.
Yeah. At the same time as my mum
Is it?
transitioned. Yeah. Well,
Super hard.
just a bit over, but at least it's definitely a changing time and finding yourself in a new way, isn't it? When your mum goes.
It's a super interesting shift that happens. It sort of sneaks up on you somehow.
Yeah. I've got a little picture of mum here that I'm always, and sometimes she's looking at me. It's always the same picture, but sometimes she's looking at me and I'm thinking, oh, I'm getting a message here, like a smile that feels good. And other times it's like, what are you doing, Tracey? Sure, you should be doing that. Oh, okay. Thanks,
I was just looking for it actually, you can't see it now. I have a little brooch that was my mum's and I took it on my run with me. I just attached it to my race vest.
Oh, nice.
I did Everest Base Camp 18 months ago about, and I took her up there as well. It's like, "I'll show you some adventure, Mum." Yep. Attach her.
Fantastic. Well, I have this, and I put this on every now and then. And it's my mum. My mum had this thing for crowns and tiaras, and it's just one of those cheap plastic ones. She had a few others around, and it kind of became the little joke, mum being the queen around here. Whenever there was something, she was a real royalist. So whenever there was something on the TV, she'd go and buy herself a new tiara, had a bottle of bubbles, and sit there and watch it, or a cup of tea, depending on what time of the day it was. But yeah, who would we be without the guidance from our parents, hey? And their systems that they've come from and all that's influenced us.
I think about my dad's system. He had rheumatic fever as a young child and they thought they were going to lose him. And he survived it, obviously. And, that resilience, that kind of push through the hard things, all that sort of thing. Sometimes I think, I think I got a bit of that off him. Those, don't let it beat you kind of thoughts. Kind of interesting where you can pull those things from. And it's funny because there's something about, people sometimes say to me, "Oh, you're very, resilient," or, "You're very tough about, when you do these things." And it sometimes doesn't feel true. And But when I link it to where I come from my origins, then it can feel more true.
Yeah.
Because, of course, that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from me. It doesn't start with me, So I think that allows me then to be a little more certain, or a little more, just more grounded in it, I guess.
And maybe even accepting of it too, like be able to go sink into that a little bit more. Yeah, I am. There's resilience here. It comes through me. Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you, Kathy. This has been a beautiful conversation. Yeah, and really chuffed that you made that massive event on the weekend.
Thank
I don't think that's on my list. Although recently I did. There's a mountain here that people often go, "Oh, I've just been up Mount Mania," and I've always gone, "Why would you do that?" But after we've been in Vietnam over the Christmas holidays, and I'm out doing a lot more activity. Last year was a real still stale year, or I couldn't put stale, feels stale. After Mum passed, there'd been a lot of stuff, and I had some physical stuff come up. So yeah, I guess my energy was stagnant and stale. And then after going to Vietnam, I've sort of come back with a new vibrancy and reconnection to myself. So I was thinking the other day, oh, I might go and have a go at Mania. And I caught myself saying that. I was like, never thought I'd say that. So yeah. So you're an inspiration. And I'll remember that in the back, well, your message in the background. Pain is only the French word for bread. Ooh la la, I love it.
I have to tell you that just 7.2K to champagne, we got to the end and they said to me, "Do you want me to pop the champagne?" I went, "No, I'm going to bed." Like 24 hours before I could face anything else.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Pretty special. Pretty special. It's been lovely, lovely, lovely talking to you, Tracey. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Oh, just before we finish, if anyone wanted to connect with you, how would they find you?
LinkedIn is the best place.
LinkedIn. Beautiful. That's Kathy Tracey on LinkedIn. Fantastic. Thank you for listening. Head over to Instagram and tell me what's resonated for you with this episode. You'll find me at tracy.cartwright. That's Tracy with no E. .cartwright, or head over to my website, tracycartwright.co.nz, and receive a free audio with the gift from your ancestors. So until next time, be kind to yourself and have fun doing it.